21 black celebrities with HIV who had the most shocking final photos. The dazzling stage lights of Hollywood can create a picture-perfect illusion, blinding millions to the chilling truth. But fame is merely a forgiving spotlight. It cannot stop a silent predator from quietly eating away at a body from the inside. A single, haunting photograph can instantly shatter that golden illusion, exposing the raw agony these icons desperately tried to hide. In this video, we uncover the earth-shattering secrets of 21 black celebrities living with HIV, tracing their tragic freefall from powerhouse legends to their devastating final days. Arthur Ashe. Look closely at the fateful press conference photo from April 1992. It isn't the blinding camera flashes that capture your attention, but a microscopic detail: the tight spasm in his jaw and the pooling wetness in his eyes. Arthur Ashe was a tennis powerhouse, an icon who gracefully conquered 3 Grand Slam titles and stood as a towering symbol of dignity. Yet, the golden illusion of his health was secretly dismantled behind closed doors. In 1988, a routine heart surgery that was supposed to save him planted an earth-shattering secret instead. A single tainted unit of blood introduced a merciless foe into his veins. He desperately tried to maintain his picture-perfect family life, but the media's invisible punishment forced a public confession, turning his raw agony into cruel tabloid fodder. By December 1992 at the United Nations, his skin had ominously darkened and his hands visibly trembled. A titan literally wasting away while mounting medical costs silently drained his assets. Severe pneumonia soon confined him to a sterile hospital bed, where he passed away surrounded by humming machines on February 6, 1993 at just 49. The chilling truth is that no amount of polished dignity can negotiate with tainted blood. But what happens when this exact same silent predator infiltrates a completely different empire, suddenly stripping the ferocious bravado from a street legend in the blink of an eye? Eazy-E. The end came with terrifying speed, extinguishing his life on March 26, 1995, a mere 10 days after he confessed his earth-shattering secret to the world. He drew his last labored breathing in an intensive care unit, having hastily married his pregnant girlfriend in a suffocating room filled with humming medical equipment just days prior. It was a staggering sudden drop for the godfather of gangster rap, a powerhouse who had built the notorious NWA and turned West Coast hip-hop into a global phenomenon. Under the dazzling stage lights, he was invincible. Yet, by February 1995, an invisible enemy was already dismantling him. He dismissed a persistent cough as mere asthma, blinding himself to the silent predator inside. On February 18, a photograph with friends shattered his golden illusion. His signature hip-hop gear hung loosely on a frame rapidly wasting away, his once sharp eyes replaced by chilling exhaustion. Within days, Cedars-Sinai doctors delivered a literal death sentence. His immune system was gone. The raw agony of severe pneumonia reduced the street king to skin over bones. In the end, the ultimate gangster was defeated not by a rival's bullet, but by microscopic betrayal, proving that no empire can buy invulnerability. And just as the deafening bass of the West Coast abruptly faded into a devastating flatline, another vibrant era's pulsating disco beat was simultaneously being drowned out by the exact same crushing silence. Sylvester. Imagine standing on the packed streets of San Francisco during the Gay Freedom Parade on June 25, 1988. I had seen him command the dazzling stage lights so many times before, a glittering powerhouse of disco and a fierce symbol of unapologetic liberation. But waiting in that roaring crowd, my excited anticipation quickly morphed into chilling speculation. When his brightly decorated wheelchair finally rolled into view, the golden illusion shattered. The flamboyant icon who once set the dance floor on fire was now skeletal, reduced to mere skin over bones. His partner had already been claimed by this century's plague, leaving him to navigate an unfillable void alone. As a fan who had celebrated to his soaring anthems, watching him struggle to lift his powerless arm for a slow, trembling wave felt like a physical blow to the chest. You could almost sense the raw agony of the neuropathy tormenting him behind his oversized sunglasses, a merciless foe making every tiny movement feel like shattered glass in his marrow. By late 1988, mounting medical costs and the invisible walls of societal neglect isolated him in his Castro District home. Morphine became his only fragile shield against the terrifying wasting away of his once vibrant frame. When he finally succumbed to the silent predator on December 16, resting peacefully in his open casket draped in a red kimono, the glittering mirror ball in my memory stopped spinning. The vibrant lights of a fearless era had officially gone dark. Across the ocean, this identical microscopic executioner cared nothing for crowns or revolutions, silently turning its devastating gaze toward a poverty-stricken cradle to steal a breath that had barely begun. Nkosi Johnson. The systemic blade of societal neglect and a paralyzing fear of stigma often cut deepest into the most innocent, turning a vulnerable child into a tragic pawn for global optics. Nkosi Johnson never asked to be the face of Africa's raw agony. The century's plague was woven into his DNA from birth, trapping him behind invisible walls in KwaZulu-Natal. Although the West celebrated his striking eloquence at the International AIDS Conference, the agonizing reality on the ground remained untouched by the applause. By late 2000, the fragile illusion shattered as the virus mercilessly attacked his brain. Horrific seizures caused his tiny body to violently convulse, rapidly aging him into a wrinkled, skeletal figure before he could even experience youth. The final photos from February 2001 capture wide, hollow eyes staring blankly into an unfillable void, a stark testament to a system that offered life-saving ARV treatment far too late, acting as an invisible punishment rather than salvation. When the 12-year-old powerhouse drew his final quiet breath on June 1, 2001, he left behind a chilling warning about the price of institutional hypocrisy. The empty echoes of global praise provide no warmth in a cold grave, just as the grandest declarations of human rights offer zero protection when the dark, narrow corridors of isolation begin to close in on a forgotten genius. Gil Scott-Heron. Before his body completely collapsed on May 27, 2011, his mind had already retreated into the shadowy corners of a silent predator. For decades, Gil Scott-Heron ran from a psychological ghost, an intense paranoia and an unfillable void that he desperately tried to drown through substance abuse. The man who laid the foundation for modern rap, the brilliant powerhouse whose sharp words moved a generation, was secretly living a devastating double life. By 2010, the century's plague combined with addiction had completely dismantled his picture-perfect status, leaving his soul to wither long before his physical form surrendered. The portrait photos taken in Harlem on March 21, 2010, exposed the chilling truth. His face was heavily lined, his teeth were entirely gone, and his eyes carried a wild, haunted look. He spent his final months trapped in an old, dark apartment, completely isolated from his children and friends due to a paralyzing fear of stigma and public disgrace. On the days when severe respiratory infections and intense joint pain didn't leave him gasping for air, he sat entirely alone, staring down at the noisy streets as an invisible enemy dragged him toward a lonely death sentence. Gil Scott-Heron's brilliant mind had vanished into the shadows well before his breathing stopped. The ultimate irony of fame is that you can coin a phrase heard around the world, yet not have a single soul hear your own final whisper. But while some icons fade away in absolute silence, others turn their hospital beds into defiant battle stations, refusing to let an executioner cut off their creative voice. Marlon Riggs. The March 16, 1994 photograph of Marlon Riggs does not just depict a dying patient. It is an active forensic record of a battlefield. Look at the tangles of medical wires crisscrossing his bare chest, the breathing tubes aggressively framing his face, and the cold gleam of electrodes. He was an outstanding documentary filmmaker, a creative powerhouse who had used cinema to aggressively dismantle racial prejudices and the invisible walls of homophobia in America. Yet his final masterpiece Black Ain't, was meticulously constructed from a hospital bed where his body was completely wasting away. From 1993, the sudden drop was swift. His immune system collapsed and a merciless foe left him nearly paralyzed. Every single step became a desperate battle against labored breathing, while extreme nerve pain forced him into heavy morphine use. Financial pressures intensified as rising treatment costs outpaced his independent filmmaking income, forcing him to rely on assistance from friends while facing deep stigma within his own community. Yet, through the tiny monitor next to his bed, his eyes still held a sharp, defiant spark as he dictated cues to his crew. He successfully finished his film on the razor-thin line between life and death before passing away on April 5, 1994. The cold, unyielding truth is that his flesh became entirely skeletal, but his cinematic lens refused to lose focus. The heavy equipment in that cramped Oakland apartment eventually fell completely silent, but this exact same wasting process was simultaneously being broadcasted to millions of unsuspecting households, disguised behind the scripted lines of a primetime television sitcom. Larry Riley. A cruel, relentless arithmetic measured his sudden drop. In just 12 short months on the set of Knots Landing, his body dropped from a robust 220 pounds to a shocking 140 pounds. For the millions of viewers tuning in every single week, they were unknowingly watching a real-time forensic descent of a powerhouse wasting away. A television icon known for playing a strong, vibrant character was secretly caught in a death sentence. The photo from a scene that aired in 1991 reveals a horrifying transformation. Deeply sunken eyes, sagging skin, and a shrunken face that shattered his golden illusion. Riley understood the brutal rules of Hollywood's systemic blade. To protect his career from racial prejudices and the public disgrace of the century's plague, he blamed his decay on kidney failure. Behind the bright stage lights, his life in Los Angeles was a suffocating nightmare of rising hospital bills and unyielding exhaustion. Yet, he kept dragging his frail frame onto the set, delivering scripted lines while fighting off continuous skin infections and a severe dry cough. On June 6, 1992, his body finally gave out in silence. The chilling calculation proves that in the entertainment industry, the show must go on, even if it costs every single pound of your flesh. The ratings for that television season remained incredibly high, but while one star vanished behind a carefully crafted lie, an Oscar-nominated powerhouse was simultaneously running entirely out of places to hide in the cold streets of New York. Howard Rollins. An Oscar nomination represents the absolute pinnacle of Hollywood, the moment the dazzling stage lights forever validate your existence. Howard Rollins reached this breathtaking summit, a creative powerhouse whose brilliant performances promised a legacy of gold. Yet, this magnificent peak creates a terrifying contrast to his earth-shattering sudden drop. Fast forward to November 16, 1996. The acclaimed actor was no longer walking a red carpet. He was stumbling outside St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, caught by a merciless paparazzo. His double life of addiction had already isolated him, but the century's plague was now executing its final act. His once handsome face was heavily swollen and severely distorted from lymphoma and toxic medications. The media quickly turned his raw agony into cheap tabloid fodder. Stripped of his wealth due to crushing treatment costs, he was confined to a tiny New York apartment, paralyzed by severe bone pain and an unfillable void left by friends who fled from the fear of stigma. He passed away alone on December 8, 1996. What is the true value of critical acclaim when your final scene is played out in absolute, agonizing isolation? Such crushing, motionless silence spares no one, eventually placing its heavy weights on the legs of an explosive dancer who once seemed entirely immune to gravity. Jean Anthony Ray. The cracked wooden floor of a small Italian theater felt a heavy, unfamiliar rhythm in late 2002. Years ago, these boards would have vibrated with the explosive, weightless leaps of a global powerhouse, an icon whose dazzling stage lights made him seem completely immune to gravity. Now, the floor only felt the agonizing drag of a man leaning desperately on a cane. The silent predator had viciously altered his golden illusion. Rather than wasting away into a skeletal figure, the century's plague triggered severe cardiovascular complications, brutally swelling his face and inflating his once agile frame. The wood groaned under the weight of his raw agony, sensing how the merciless foe was suffocating the rhythm right out of his veins. Trapped in a cramped Roman apartment behind invisible walls of poverty and an unfillable void of isolation, he dragged himself back to perform simply to survive. The stage offered one final, forgiving spotlight before a massive stroke carried out his death sentence directly on its surface on November 14, 2003. When his body fell, the wooden floor went completely silent, holding the cold memory of a pulse that would never return. Such a sudden public collapse transforms any platform into a merciless execution block, a terrifying reality where a respected broadcaster's desk becomes the exact place where a suffocating truth is finally gasped out loud. Max Robinson. The wirepress photo captures pure raw agony. A man strapped to a stretcher, his face contorted in a desperate fight for breath. This brutal sudden drop occurred on December 21, 1988, just 2 hours before his death sentence was finalized at Howard University Hospital. Only moments earlier, he had collapsed immediately after delivering his final speech, his skin ominously gray and his body rapidly wasting away. Before this earth-shattering secret consumed him, Robinson was a television powerhouse, the very first black anchor of a national news program. For 5 years, he flawlessly maintained a golden illusion, confidently reporting the world's tragedies to millions while a silent predator destroyed him from within. A paralyzing fear of public disgrace kept his suffering hidden behind a crisp suit until his legs simply gave out. The ultimate newsman became the most devastating headline of all, proving that prestige cannot alter the swift, fragile nature of mortality. While one pioneer's voice was abruptly silenced by a hidden truth, Another bold artist intentionally weaponized his own failing vocal cords, bravely turning a packed African stadium into an agonizing public confessional. Philly Lutaya. I was standing shoulder to shoulder in the suffocating heat of Nakavubo Stadium on October 26, 1989, waiting for Uganda's biggest musical powerhouse to command the dazzling stage lights. But when Philly Lutaya finally stepped out, the collective illusion shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Instead of a vibrant icon, a skeletal figure appeared, his clothes hanging completely loose on a frame rapidly wasting away. The century's plague had brutally stripped him down to skin over bones. As a fan, the raw agony of that moment was suffocating. He stood entirely alone, clutching the microphone, singing a heartbreaking confession of loneliness. Yet, the systemic blade of public disgrace swung mercilessly from the crowd. People actually booed, their fear of stigma twisting into chilling speculation that he was faking his death sentence for record sales. Despite this crushing invisible punishment, he bravely carried his earth-shattering secret into churches and schools, fighting the invisible enemy until his labored breathing finally stopped on December 15, 1989, at age 38. The stadium lights eventually went permanently dark, leaving behind a cold, empty stage where a hero once stood alone against the world. Yet this exact same microscopic assassin doesn't just destroy the bodies of solitary singers. It is equally capable of felling a towering Hollywood giant, proving that sheer physical mass offers absolutely zero armor. Kevin Peter Hall. The initial fracture in his massive golden illusion was a routine medical procedure. Following a devastating car crash, he received a blood transfusion, a single, seemingly insignificant medical choice that unleashed an earth-shattering secret into his veins. Kevin Peter Hall, the towering 7'2" powerhouse who terrified millions as the unstoppable predator, was suddenly hunted by a silent predator he could not fight. The towering physique that Hollywood prized quickly transformed into a merciless foe. By October 1990, a photograph at a public event exposed his shocking sudden drop. His towering frame was visibly wasting away, his cheeks deeply sunken as if his skin could no longer cling to his own skull. The century's plague rapidly trapped him behind invisible walls. He was confined to a specially built, oversized medical bed in his Los Angeles home, where extreme joint pain made every microscopic movement an exercise in raw agony. Forced into a heavy reliance on painkillers, the crushing treatment costs devastated his family's finances. The cinematic giant who once made the silver screen tremble was reduced to lying in suffocating silence, staring blankly at the ceiling until his final labored breathing ceased on April 10, 1991. It is a chilling reminder of how swiftly the fortress of the body can be breached by an unseen invader. And as this terrifying physical decline unfolded behind closed doors, a pop sensation's desperate attempt to mask his own rapid decay was brutally exposed under the relentless flash of a camera. Jermaine Stewart. The golden illusion demands absolute visual perfection, presenting a picture-perfect facade that violently clashes with the raw agony of reality. For Jermaine Stewart, a pop powerhouse renowned for his immaculate style, maintaining this glamorous image became an exhausting battle against a silent predator. In his final months in Chicago, dazzling stage lights were replaced by the dim bulbs of a makeshift home studio. By January 17, 1997, a tragic photo shoot exposed a terrifying sudden drop. He was draped in brightly colored performance gear, a desperate attempt to project vitality. Yet the camera captured a merciless foe at work. His skin had turned a lifeless gray, his eyes bulged unnaturally, and his cheeks were deeply hollowed from the extreme wasting away caused by HIV and liver cancer. His signature smile was now a forced, weary grimace. To fund his treatments, he sold the very jewelry that once defined him, a cruel systemic blade of financial ruin. He isolated himself, gasping for air as he stubbornly recorded vocals until his death sentence concluded on March 17, 1997. The public rarely comprehends the horror hiding beneath a vibrant pop costume. And this agonizing charade of masking decay is precisely what occurs when a television star is forced to paint a cheerful expression onto a body actively collapsing between scripted takes. Franklin Seals. Zoom in on a still photograph from the Amen set dated November 1987. Past the neat wardrobe, heavy makeup drastically fails to conceal his deeply sunken eyes and lifeless skin. He was a television powerhouse on hits like Silver Spoons, yet this single frame exposes an earth-shattering secret. Behind his golden illusion, a silent predator was driving a terrifying sudden drop. He was literally wasting away between takes, so paralyzed by exhaustion that he had to be physically supported just to hit his marks. Terrified of public disgrace and Hollywood's merciless systemic blade, he kept his death sentence completely hidden to protect his income. His world eventually shrank to a cramped Brooklyn apartment where he lay entirely helpless until his final labored breathing ceased on May 14, 1990. The camera brilliantly captures flawless acting, but it never negotiates with a biological executioner. A scripted sitcom offers a temporary escape, but reality inevitably traps its victims in a suffocating room where a once limitless instructor can merely twitch his fingertips. Willie Ninja. The spiral notebook resting on the edge of the Harlem hospital bed silently absorbed the final, flickering lessons of a global powerhouse. For years, its pages had captured the flawless geometry of a man who birthed voguing and inspired an entire generation of artists. But by July 2006, this inanimate witness recorded a terrifying sudden drop. The silent predator, manifesting as severe heart failure, had pinned the legendary dancer to the mattress. In a haunting photograph, his golden illusion is completely shattered. His face is skeletal, his skin darkened by the century's plague. The heavy bedsheets felt the raw agony of his swollen legs, completely paralyzed by a merciless foe. Yet, above those covers, his thin, wasting away fingers still curled and glided through the air with precise rhythm. He dictated his final legacy to a student, fiercely defying his death sentence. When he passed away with a satisfied smile on September 30, 2006, the notebook finally snapped shut, leaving the room in a heavy, motionless silence. The fierce rhythm of ballroom was forever captured in ink, just as another monumental pioneer of American dance was simultaneously discovering that even the most celebrated bodily flexibility eventually surrenders to a horrifying, rigid decay. Elvin I. A Kennedy Center honor is the ultimate coronation for a creative powerhouse, celebrating a lifetime of genius under dazzling stage lights. Yet, this magnificent peak brutally masked his earth-shattering secret. In December 1988, while accepting America's highest artistic award, a photograph exposed a terrifying sudden drop. The modern dance legend was secretly battling a merciless foe. His face was heavily swollen, his features heavily distorted, and his skin stretched unnaturally tight by raw agony. Dreading public disgrace, he retreated behind invisible walls in his Manhattan apartment, desperately hiding his wasting away body from his own dance company until his quiet death sentence concluded on December 1, 1989. Does ultimate prestige matter when your flesh becomes a silent prison? This identical, stifling isolation soon claimed another revolutionary icon, whose thunderous political roars were eventually suffocated inside a hot, medicine-scented bedroom. Filudi. On August 12, 1997, millions of people in Lagos filed past a transparent glass casket, staring at a terrifying sudden drop. The figure inside was completely skeletal, just thin skin clinging tightly to knobby bones. This was Fela Kuti, the Afrobeat powerhouse and fierce political icon who once stirred an entire generation. But before this public exhibition, his final time inside the Calcutta Republic was a horrifying descent into raw agony. The dazzling stage lights were forcefully replaced by a hot, medicine-scented room where a silent predator, manifesting as multiple organ and heart failure, pinned him permanently to a bed. He went from dynamically commanding crowds to barely nodding his head to direct his band. Rapidly wasting away, he faced an invisible punishment as former supporters turned their backs, cruelly viewing the century's plague as the justified price for his rebellious lifestyle. On August 2, 1997, his labored breathing permanently stopped. A transparent glass box ultimately proves that no amount of revolutionary fire can ever burn away a biological death sentence. This identical merciless foe soon infiltrated a much quieter space, abruptly replacing the sweltering heat of Lagos with the agonizing isolation of a makeshift recording booth in Michigan. Bobby DeBarge. Long before his physical shell surrendered, his soul was already haunted by an internal psychological ghost, an unfillable void left by years of crushing addiction and the dark trauma of a prison cell. Bobby DeBarge was the sensational powerhouse and lead voice of Switch, an icon who created timeless hits that moved an entire generation. But after his release from prison in late 1994, his golden illusion of starting over was instantly shattered. Instead, a silent predator, coupled with severe liver damage, was executing a rapid death sentence inside a small Michigan house. The haunting December 27, 1994 photograph captures his sudden drop. Leaning against a studio wall, his face was haggard, his eyes vacant, and his body so wasting away that his shoulders resembled moving coat hangers. He fiercely fought this merciless foe to record his final album, It's Not Over, but his iconic voice was weak and broken, forcing him to lean against the wall between waves of labored breathing. As finances ran dry, the raw agony of jaundice and stomach pain forced him to curl up on a sofa, devastated by the feeling of becoming a burden. Following a tragic stroke on August 16, 1995, his battle ended at Grand Rapids Hospital. Eazy-E Broadbent. For over 3 decades, her life played out across a stark mathematical descent. Imagine counting 30 long years of taking toxic medications, tracking blood cells daily, and watching a dialysis machine steadily measure your life in minutes. Eazy-E Broadbent was a monumental powerhouse of the HIV/AIDS movement, an icon who famously shattered the golden illusion of public indifference at a young age by sharing her earth-shattering secret with millions. Yet, this long, heroic timeline inevitably reached a merciless sudden drop. By late 2023, the fierce activist was forcefully pinned to a hospital bed in Las Vegas, caught in a brutal equation where her long-term survival strategy was running out of time. A haunting photograph from this era reveals the raw agony of her body completely wasting away. Her face was heavily swollen from kidney failure, her skin unnaturally tight, and her hair falling out in thin strands. The systemic blade of financial exhaustion weighed heavily on her family as treatment costs skyrocketed. On February 20, 2024, at age 39, her battle concluded. Her lifespan can be measured in years, but the true calculation is the immense courage it took to stare down a death sentence every single day. The rhythmic hum of that dialysis machine in Las Vegas eventually flatlined into absolute silence, yet a completely different kind of quiet isolation was simultaneously swallowing a forgotten musical prodigy inside a damp, suffocating room thousands of miles away. Kiki Jean. Look closely at the walls of that cramped rented room in Accra in May 2004. It isn't the damp air or the suffocating smell of medicine and sweat that captures your attention, but the total absence of life. Kiki Jean was a keyboard prodigy with Osibisa, a powerhouse whose explosive energy once shook global stages. Yet, his final days reveal an earth-shattering secret. The golden illusion of fame offers zero protection against a silent predator. A haunting final photograph exposes a terrifying sudden drop. He sat slumping in an old chair, his body so skeletal and wasting away that his thin shirt could no longer hide the sharp shoulder blades threatening to pierce through the fabric. His cheeks were deeply hollowed, his skin stretched tightly over raw agony. The century's plague, manifesting as constant fever and continuous diarrhea, had turned him into a merciless foe of his own existence. Trapped behind invisible walls of absolute isolation, with no family or friends to lean on, he survived solely on small charitable food portions. He ultimately succumbed to his death sentence on June 18, 2004, leaving behind a chilling truth. Musical genius is easily forgotten when the body becomes tabloid fodder. The damp silence of that Accra room eventually consumed a solitary genius, just as the bright lights of a New York charity event were simultaneously casting long, terrifying shadows over a visionary creator's final public smile. Willi Smith. The golden illusion of New York's elite fashion scene demands absolute perfection under dazzling stage lights. In March 1987, pioneering designer Willi Smith stood at a high-profile charity event, flashing a brilliant smile to the cameras. Yet, this glamorous moment masked a terrifying sudden drop. He was a creative powerhouse who revolutionized streetwear, but a silent predator was already claiming him. His cheeks were visibly sinking, his eyes completely devoid of their usual spark. Seeking inspiration, he took a fateful trip to India, but the journey accelerated his death sentence. Upon returning, the century's plague unleashed raw agony. Prolonged fevers left his body completely wasting away. His vibrant Soho studio became a quiet tomb of scattered fabrics and half-finished sketches. As finances wavered under the systemic blade, friends vanished due to a paralyzing fear of stigma. On April 17, 1987, this iconic star passed away entirely alone, his trembling hand unable to hold a pen. The industry can stitch together the most beautiful garments, but it can never tailor a cure for the merciless foe that unravels the human soul.